Merci beaucoup pour m'avoir invité d'être la personne qui ouvre cette soirée. C'est un grand privilège pour moi de parler dans le cadre des Nations Unies parce que je suis un enfant des Nations Unies. J'ai été tout petit quand les Nations Unies ont commencé et nous ici, parce que j'étais élevé ici à Ottawa, nous étions tout à fait là-dedans parce que notre instituteur nous a dit, quand j'étais dans la 3e classe, qu'il y avait John Humphreys qui a écrit la Déclaration des droits humains. So from the age of 9, I knew about the United Nations and thought of it as a very important kind of forum for the world and for peace. Because I am a child of war who has become a person of peace, whose life is dedicated to making sure that people understand each other, that people are not violent with each other, that people talk things out, that people understand each other in whatever languages they choose to speak. When we first came to Canada, I was a refugee of 3. I was exactly the same age as that little boy, Alan Kurdi, that you saw the picture of, lying face down on the beach, dead, in Greece. I was exactly his age when we waited on a dock in Hong Kong to be chosen by the Red Cross to get on a boat to escape Japanese-occupied Hong Kong. It's a very vivid and interesting story, and I can still feel in myself today, although I was then only 3, I can still feel that sense that we were going to be able to get away, that we would not be left behind. Today, I identify with all refugees. I identify with people who come with very little. We had 1 suitcase each, my parents, my brother, and I, and we arrived in Ottawa just before the winter of 1942, one of the coldest on record. We happened to live at 277 Sussex Street, as it was then, not very grand, later to be Sussex Avenue, with a streetcar stop right outside the door so that on Sundays we could take it to Rockcliffe Park where we ate hot dogs and had a picnic. And in coming to Canada, we were welcomed, not that we were a group, not that anything was organized for us, but we were welcomed by individual Canadians. Ce sont les Canadiens qui nous ont accueillis de leur cœur. And yet, it was a white country that had a dark past. We came to the country 17 years after the Chinese Exclusion Act had been passed, barring really, virtually, Chinese from coming, because Canada didn't want yellow people. Canada wanted white people. We were here 11 months before the Japanese were interned from the West Coast and were dispersed and forbidden to go back to where they had lived, many of them already born there, many of them 2 generations there on the West Coast. This country was a white country with this dark history. But we've come a long way since then. But we must always remember that history. And we must remember that the various levels of government and the way we were made it possible for us to change. Because in the 30s, the federal government disallowed some 70 laws that had been put in place by the BC government that were racist. And the federal government disallowed them. So we've always had these checks and balances. Just we went a little crazy during the Second World War. We were welcomed here by the Anglican Church, an instrument of peace because it is a church, and also because, like all religious groups, it is multicultural and multinational. We were welcomed to Christ Church Cathedral, then to St. John the Evangelist. We were welcomed by the Jewish pharmacist on Rideau Street, the Malots. We were walked to school by Barbara Potter and her family, who lived in Rockcliffe. We had all of that, and when we went to school, which was a public school, we were part of a group of people who were mostly white Canadians, except for Syrians. That seemed to be the most diverse thing that we had in Ottawa. Those of you who might have grown up here will remember that. They were Syrians, and there was not a single black family that I knew of, nor was there a single South Asian family, and I didn't know anybody like that till I went to Toronto when I was 17 to go to university. It's very interesting that the public education system is the one which we must believe in if we believe that diversity works. Because everybody of all income streams from everywhere can go to public education. That's why we must continue to support it always. We cannot have a country that is peaceful, a country that has ideals without a good public education system. All the things that we put public money into, and we must oversee it, of course. We must make sure that the governments that we have are able to make them work, like our public health system. All of those public things are important because they make all of us feel part of the whole. The public education system here at Kent Street School, we were given some equipment and we were told, make a little project about Indians. So we were told to bring little pieces of cedar, we were told to bring little pieces of feathers, and we could make teepees, and we would put them on a beaver board, and then we were given little stick figures that we could put there. Nobody ever said to us that 40 miles from here, there was the reserve at Maniwaki, where there were living Indians. We treated them as though they were Greeks and Romans of the ancient times. We were not told at that time that this place was a sacred place where the meeting of the three rivers had always meant the Aboriginal people had a place. That was where we were then. That was the kind of country we were then. But we were able to grow. We were able to say, okay, that's what we know about, that's where it was. And then at the end of the war, we were inundated, in the nicest possible way, I think, by displaced people who had to spend 1 year in domestic service or on a farm. So that my mother met at a cocktail party at a friend's house, a woman who had been a ballerina in Budapest, I remember her telling me, and the person she worked for here in Rockcliffe made her cut her hair because she didn't think that it was a right thing for somebody who was a maid to have long blonde hair. And I knew that people went out west, and I later went to school with some of them and worked on farms for a year, but everybody wanted to stay and work in Canada. At my local corner store, I remember Louis and Dave, who ran the corner store and were terrific to us. One day they had somebody working for them, and then after a while she didn't. But I had noticed every day that she had a tattoo on her hand. And I said to Dave, "What's that tattoo? Why does that woman have a number on her hand?" And he said, "I'll tell you, but then you have to tell Bill," that was my father, "you got to tell Bill that I told you." And then he told me about concentration camps. And that was in 1948. In this city, it's the capital city of Canada, there was everything. And I learned to be everything. When I went to high school, I was very fortunate in that I was coached in order to become a public speaker, because my high school English teacher believed in me and believed that I had a future in the public. Why did he believe that? I have no idea. But in a public high school, I guess even teachers can think of what kind of students they want what kind of people they want their students to become. As a result of that, I went to the University of Toronto because he had gone to the University of Toronto, and as a result of that, my life changed completely. Because my father had a job at the Canadian government, he was a clerk in the Oils and Fats Department of the Department of Trades and Commerce, and worked actually for John Turner's mother, who was one of the highest placed civil servants, women civil servants there was during the war. He saw that there were people who spoke French and English, and he said to me, I was 7, "You're going to learn French, because the people who know both French and English are the people who are going to really run Canada." And he was right. Why would he know that? He knew that because he worked here, because he listened to people, and that was what happened. I think we can be happy that we have created a society out of darkness, out of the past, that is now our Canada.